Now let's bring in the new generation of venture capitalists for some perspective on all of this IPO excitement. Marissa Campise worked for StockTwits before getting recruited by venture firm Greycroft. About a month ago, she moved over to Venrock, and she's visiting the Valley right now and scouting for new investment opportunities. One of the youngest female VC superstars, Marissa is based in New York, but she joins us today in our studios here in San Francisco. And great to have you, a venture quote-unquote rock star, as you've been called. I have to start off with this interview we just did with Vivek Wadhwa, who made a pretty compelling, forceful case for a bubble and Silicon Valley insanity, as he called it. What's your reaction to that?
I caught a little bit of it. I think, aren't we too paranoid that we're in a bubble to be in an actual bubble? I think it's too soon to tell. I mean, there's a lot of companies that you can point to that have business models. I mean, Zynga is one of the fastest growing companies earnings-wise in our history. You know, they're about to do 1.5 billion or projected to do 1.5 billion this year, 4 billion in 2013, 50% of which is profits. I mean, incredibly sticky. I think it's too soon to tell whether or not we're in a bubble.
What about a Groupon, though, where you're seeing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenues and no profits? He called it a Ponzi scheme.
There have been, I mean, so I don't want to comment on the Ponzi scheme. I don't.
Join the club.
But I mean, then you have companies like LinkedIn, I mean, that have real business models. And LinkedIn did 250 million in revenue last year, and they're projecting to do 450 this year with 3 really strong, revenue streams. So I think it's too soon, and I do not think we're in a bubble.
Well, let's talk about how all of this excitement is filtering down into the world of venture capitalists. Sure. For example, Square, Jack Dorsey's mobile payment system, just raised $100 million. Its valuation quadrupled from $250 or $240 to $1 billion in 6 months. Is that justified?
Well, I mean, Square's attacking a big market, so they need a lot of money to go after it. Where I do think you see some things happening is the very early stage. So I'm looking at companies that, I don't want to say it perverts the capital efficient mind, but sometimes people say, should I raise money because this is the time to raise money? And maybe they don't necessarily need money. Or you have people that are wanting to place internet bets, and so they offer really high prices for companies that maybe should not be priced that way.
So are you guys looking at more companies than ever before? Are you investing in more companies than ever before?
We are seeing a lot of companies for sure. But, look, we're excited about all of the companies that are getting started. But we do look, is there an opportunity here? Is there a real business here? And we do apply an analysis, and we do have an analytical lens that we apply to our investments. So, we are careful.
All right, I want to bring in our editor-at-large, Corey Johnson, who's been covering the venture capital industry here in Silicon Valley for many, many years. Corey?
Hey, Marissa, so what are you looking at? What kind of deals are you trying to invest in?
So, Corey, one of the things that we're, I think, pretty excited about is the category of commerce. Because, if you look at some of the non-e-commerce giants of Web 1.0, they have largely been disrupted, right? AOL, MSN, by Facebook, Google, and now Twitter. But in the commerce category, that disruption hasn't happened yet. So, a lot of the companies that we're seeing now are really talking about building social inside the core of their product. And, some of the best run companies on the internet, I think, are vulnerable on this front. Amazon may be vulnerable on this front.
Yeah, there's a company called Threadless, right, which is that same kind of thing. It's pure commerce, but the users of the site are the designers of the product, and they rank the stuff as well on Threadless.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's community-driven commerce. There's another site called Quirky.com, which essentially does something very similar. The communities drive, invention, and the community votes on the products. And then Quirky, the company, develops the product and, ships it to big box retailers. And it's new innovation commerce on the creation side.
Are those by definition smaller companies? Amazon got to be such a giant business, not a terribly profitable business, but giant because they went after all categories. Are these by definition smaller businesses?
I think it's too soon to tell. I mean, I can't talk about the financials with some of these companies, but I think that, some of them are growing pretty quickly and the world is changing. I mean, Amazon is a phenomenal business, and I would, be the first. I don't critique their business at all. I'm big fan, and I go to the site all the time. But I still think they're very Web 1.0 in how they hold on to all your data. It's really not easy to share things. They haven't interacted that well with Facebook. And I read a lot in the blogosphere about how social integrations are happening with Amazon. But when I'm a user and I'm on the site, it's very hard for me to find where this social functionality is coming from. So in my opinion, I just think that it's too soon to tell, and it hasn't happened yet because the commerce companies that are the giants are still there. But there is, it basically suggests that there's, companies that can come in and really disrupt this market. And we'd like to see those companies and hopefully, capture that opportunity.
The reality is there are more startups out there because companies are cheaper to start, and that's led to another thing we're seeing in the Valley called talent wars, whether it's for engineers or designers or venture capitalists like yourself. I mean, you've been written about in the press. You've been poached by high-level firms. I mean, how do you, in this kind of environment where there is so much excitement, manage your own life and your own career?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's hype. So I think, sometimes people write things to get views, page views. But I think, look, as far as...
It's very humble of you to say.
I think as far as there's, there is a lot of companies starting. So obviously, there's only a certain amount of people that can go into those companies. So it is tough, especially for technical talent, I think, for some of, the companies that I've invested in. It's hard to find people. And there are, big players that are offering sizable checks to stay instead of leaving if you catch the startup bug. But, on the investor side, I think it's a little bit hyped.
We've been talking about the lack of women in technology. How has being a woman impacted you as a venture capitalist? Is it relevant?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of reasons why there's a lack of women, but I think going forward you'll see more and more women. I'm seeing a lot more women founders. Venrock has been recognized by Astia for backing women founders. We have quite a few companies in our portfolio that are founded by women. I think, look, diversity is fun, but it's also necessary. It positively influences outcomes. I mean, women bring a certain point of view to the table that obviously men cannot. And we do control a large percentage of the purchases on the internet. I think it's 80% plus. So I think it's all positive.
Marissa, you've got an interesting personal story as well. I mean, you put yourself through Yale as a single mother. You're a yoga instructor. How does that and you did something at Good Morning America to sort of call attention to that in a certain way. How has that informed the kinds of investments you've made?
Well, that's a good question.
Did I stump the band?
I didn't know that would come up. So did you Google me, Corey? I think, look, your life experience, always informs kind of the path that how you do things. So I would say for me, well, how about this? Sometimes in the market in 2010, if someone came around, say, in a Series A investment, and they wanted to take money off the table, I would say, if you haven't really proved anything yet and you want to take money off the table, is the passion really there? I mean, I looked back on my own life and I, really pushed and persisted because I knew that I had to and I had someone that I was caring for. So, I mean, that might be one way, but I think, overall you are, a sum of your experiences. So I guess that's how it plays in.
You handled that question well. I can see why they call you a rock star. Marissa Campise, thanks so much for joining us. Great to have you in town from New York.
Thank you.